It is with joy that we welcome you to Advent Hope Animation, a ministry dedicated to bringing the Advent message to life through the power of animation. Through the inspired writings of Ellen White, we seek to share the visions, counsels, and warnings given by the Lord to prepare His people for the soon return of our Saviour. Throughout history, God has used various means to proclaim His truth, through the spoken word, the written page, and now through visual storytelling. If your heart is stirred to grow in faith and understanding, we invite you to subscribe and join us on this sacred journey. I had dreamed that a person brought to me a web of white cloth and bade me cut it into garments for persons of all sizes and all descriptions of character and circumstances in life. I was told to cut them out and hang them up, all ready to be made when called for. I had the impression that many for whom I was required to cut garments were unworthy. I inquired if that was the last piece of cloth I should have to cut, and was told that it was not, that as soon as I had finished this one, there were others for me to take hold of. I felt discouraged at the amount of work before me, and stated that I had been engaged in cutting garments for others for more than 20 years, and my labours had not been appreciated. Neither did I see that my work had accomplished much good. I spoke to the person who brought the cloth to me of one woman in particular for whom he had told me to cut a garment. I stated that she would not prize the garment and that it would be a loss of time and material to present it to her. She was very poor, of inferior intellect, and untidy in her habits, and would soon soil it. The person replied, "Cut out the garments. That is your duty. The loss is not yours, but mine. God sees not as man sees. He lays out the work that he would have done, and you do not know which will prosper, this or that. It will be found that many such poor souls will go into the kingdom, while others, who are favoured with all the blessings of life, having good intellects and pleasant surroundings, giving them all the advantages of improvement, will be left out. It will be seen that these poor souls have lived up to the feeble light which they had, and have improved by the limited means within their reach, and lived much more acceptably than some others who have enjoyed full light and ample means for improvement." I then held up my hands, calloused as they were with long use of the shears, and stated that I could but shrink at the thought of pursuing this kind of labour. The person again repeated, "Cut out the garments. Your release has not yet come." With feelings of great weariness, I arose to engage in the work. Before me lay new, polished shears, which I commenced using. At once, my feelings of weariness and discouragement left me. The shears seemed to cut with hardly an effort on my part, and I cut out garment after garment with comparative ease. About this time we commenced labour for our brethren and friends near Greenville. As is the case in many places, our brethren needed help. There were some who kept the Sabbath, yet did not belong to the church, and also some who had given up the Sabbath, who needed help. We felt disposed to help these poor souls, but the past course and present position of leading members of the church in relation to these persons made it almost impossible for us to approach them. In labouring with the erring, some of our brethren had been too rigid, too cutting in remarks, and when some were disposed to reject their counsel and separate from them, they would say, "Well, if they want to go off, let them go. While such a lack of the compassion and long-suffering and tenderness of Jesus was manifested by his professed followers, these poor, erring, inexperienced souls, buffeted by Satan, were certain to make shipwreck of faith. However great may be the wrongs and sins of the erring, our brethren must learn to manifest not only the tenderness of the Great Shepherd, but also his undying care and love for the poor straying sheep. Our ministers toil and lecture week after week and rejoice that a few souls embrace the truth, and yet brethren of a prompt, decided turn of mind may, in 5 minutes, destroy their work by indulging the feelings which prompt words like these: well, if they want to leave us, let them go. We found that we could do nothing for the scattered sheep near us until we had first corrected the wrongs in many of the members of the church. They had let these poor souls wander. They felt no burden for them. In fact, they seemed shut up to themselves and were dying a spiritual death for want of spiritual exercise. They still loved the general cause and were ready to help sustain it. They would take good care of the servants of God. But there was a decided want of care for widows, orphans, and the feeble of the flock. Besides some interest for the cause in general, there was but little apparent interest for any, only their own families. With so narrow a religion, they were dying a spiritual death. There were some who kept the Sabbath, attended meeting, and paid systematic benevolence, yet were out of the church, and it is true that they were not fit to belong to any church. But while leading church members stood as some in that church did, giving them little or no encouragement, it was almost impossible for them to arise in the strength of God and do better. As we began to labour with the church and teach them that they must have a spirit of labour for the erring, much that I had seen relative to the cause in that place opened before me, and I wrote out pointed testimonies not only for those who had erred greatly and were out of the church, but for those members in the church who had erred greatly in not going in search of the lost sheep. And I was never more disappointed in the manner in which these testimonies were received. When those who had been greatly in fault were reproved by most pointed testimonies, read to them publicly, they received them and confessed with tears. But some of those in the church, who claimed to be the fast friends of the cause and the testimonies, could hardly think it possible that they had been as wrong as the testimonies declared them to be. When told that they were self-caring, shut up to themselves and families, that they had failed to care for others, had been exclusive, and had left precious souls to perish, that they were in danger of being overbearing and self-righteous, they were brought into a state of great agitation and trial. But this experience was just what they needed to teach them forbearance toward others in a similar state of trial. There are many who feel sure that they will have no trial respecting the testimonies, and continue to feel so till they are tested. They think it strange that any can doubt. They are severe with those who manifest doubts, and cut and slash to show their zeal for the testimonies, manifesting more self-righteousness than humility. But when the Lord reproves them for their wrongs, they find themselves as weak as water. Then they can hardly endure the trial. These things should teach them humility, self-abasement, tenderness, and undying love for the erring. It seems to me that the Lord is giving the erring, the weak and trembling, and even those who have apostatized from the truth, a special call to come fully into the fold. But there are but few in our churches who feel that this is the case, and there are still fewer who stand where they can help such. There are more who stand directly in the way of these poor souls. Very many have an exacting spirit. They require them to come to just such and such terms before they will reach to them the helping hand. Thus they hold them off at arm's length. They have not learned that they have a special duty to go and search for these lost sheep. They must not wait till these come to them. Read the touching parable of the lost sheep. The Pharisees murmured because Jesus received publicans and common sinners and ate with them. In their self-righteousness, they despised these poor sinners who gladly heard the words of Jesus. To rebuke this spirit in the scribes and Pharisees and leave an impressive lesson for all, the Lord gave the parable of the lost sheep. Notice in particular the following points. The 99 sheep are left, and diligent search is made for the one that is lost. The entire effort is made for this unfortunate sheep. So should the effort of the church be directed in behalf of those members who are straying from the fold of Christ. And have they wandered far away? Do not wait till they return before you try to help them, but go in search of them. When the lost sheep was found, it was borne home with joy, and much rejoicing followed. This illustrates the blessed, joyful work of labouring for the erring. The church that engages successfully in this work is a happy church. That man or that woman whose soul is drawn out in compassion and love for the erring, and who labours to bring them to the fold of the great shepherd, is engaged in a blessed work. And oh, what a soul-enrapturing thought, that when one sinner is thus reclaimed, there is more joy in heaven than over 99 just persons. Selfish, exclusive, exacting souls who seem to fear to help those in error, as though they would become polluted by so doing, do not taste of the sweets of this missionary work. They do not feel that blessedness which fills all heaven with rejoicing upon the rescue of one who has gone astray. They are shut up to their narrow views and feelings, and are becoming as dry and unfruitful as the mountains of Gilboa, upon which there was neither dew nor rain. Let a strong man be shut away from labour, and he becomes feeble. That church, or those persons who shut themselves away from bearing burdens for others, who shut themselves up to themselves, will soon suffer spiritual feebleness. It is labour that keeps the strong man strong, and spiritual labour, toil and burden-bearing is what will give strength to the Church of Christ.